This here is my girlfriend's 1978 Ford F100. She inherited from her late father. It has been sitting under a tree for the past several years, and I'm going to take y'all with me as I try to make this thing roadworthy. This truck came with a 400M and a C6 transmission, and the standard 2-barrel carburetor. This truck's all original. It's maybe had a tune-up probably 10 years ago. Plugs and wires and the air filter and stuff like that, and maybe a new battery, but had an issue with vapor locking after you drive for a few miles. But we're going to solve all that. We're going to try to put a Holley Sniper EFI on this thing and get it updated. I've already got a nice little stack of parts here to go on this thing. I picked up a Holley Sniper EFI off of Facebook Marketplace. We got a new battery. We got fuel hose, new fuel filter, pressure gauge, fuel line connections, wire set plugs, new wiring for the fuel pump, oil filter, new gas cap, wheel cylinders. Just a handful of little things here to kind of get it going. Now I've already dropped the tank out of the back. This thing was pretty crusty. It's just got the standard single line fuel supply with the sending unit for the gauge in there. I got on Amazon. Dorman makes this replacement tank. I'll link in the description below if you guys are interested in trying to pick this up. It was like $100, and from like an '89 Bronco I got this sending unit that's got a supply and return. Now here's the setup that goes inside the tank here. This is just a cheap Amazon. I think it's like the equivalent of a Walbro 255. Yeah, the cool thing about swapping over to this Bronco sending unit is it gives you a supply and return. And I got these nice little Dorman plastic fuel line quick disconnects. I'll link in the description all this stuff here, this whole setup here, so if you're trying to replicate this for your project. Shout out to Bronco Graveyard. They make this nice little plug here. It makes it super simple to pop that on there and get you set up to go, so your fuel pump has power and ground, and also the signal wire for the sending unit. Alright, so I run into a small issue here trying to get these straps to hook up here. You can see it, but where the fuel lines are, they kind of bump into this little cross section here, and they won't allow me to put the tank all the way up. Those fuel lines need to go up and over this little section here, kind of like that little line does there. So I'm gonna have to figure something out here. So looking at the old sending unit here, I see this line is sort of 45'd out of the unit, whereas that Bronco one, you know, it bends it out to where the lines point straight down rather than this direction here to go up over that little cross section under the bed. So I'm gonna pull that tank back out and see if I can bend those lines to more resemble what we have going on here. Yeah, I don't know how I missed this, but it's a huge difference. So let's see if we can't get those bent a little more straight. So I'm gonna try to use this wrench to kind of pry this thing back up. We'll see. It worked and it didn't. Cracked this down here. That's not great, but whatever. So it cracked it there, but it's all soldered and stuff on the bottom side. So we're gonna run it. I think I got the angle a little better now. So I came up with a slick idea to hit this with a little map gas torch and melt that solder down. Looks like it sealed up good. Maybe we're in the clear. Alright, after a little bit of persuading, we got the tank in. Straps are on, and I got these to where they're pointing out of the top now. So we should be good to go. Now that the fuel tank is in, putting the Holley EFI kit on here. As you can see, I've already got the weigh-in 4-barrel carb on there with the Fel-Pro gaskets in there. So a little trick I figured out to get the OEM intake out without pulling the distributor was to look in the back there. You see that paper towel sticking out of there? I pulled out the stock oil pressure sensor. That allowed me to slide the intake back, you know, back and up and out, and that made life quite a bit easier. Alright, so I'm trying to hook up the throttle linkage here. This thing goes right here. So So I grabbed the old carburetor, and this little piece was stuck in here. So I ground the backside down, popped this thing out. I can attach this to this little piece right here, stick it in there. That way the throttle linkage will hook up and be mostly factory. So I found this little nut and bolt. I'm going to try to chop the head off of that bolt and weld it to the base of that little pin thing. Alright, here's what we're working with. Hopefully I can weld that little section there, make it all one piece. Boom, there it is. Pop this on here. Quick little clip. We got a throttle. Alright, now that I got the Holley all hooked up, throttle and the oil pressure sensor and all that stuff back in, I'll start pulling the plugs out. Since this thing's been sitting for so long, I'm going to dump some ATF in the cylinders and hopefully loosen the rings up. But before I do that, I'm going to try to crank this thing by hand, see if I can get it to move like it is. Oh, a little crusty. I got all the plugs out, so I shouldn't have a lot of resistance. Well, looks like it rolls over pretty good. Alright, now we can put a little ATF in this thing. Let it all get down in there. Now I'm not going to need this mechanical pump anymore, so I'm going to pull it off and make a little block off plate. You can just leave it in there, but I don't know, I just want to get rid of it. Alright, now that I got this out, I'm going to trace that shape and make a little block off plate. And voila! Got us a block off plate. Let's get this thing tossed on. Alright, we'll put a little right stuff on there, call her good. And there it is. Had to trim down the top bolt a little bit and make a little spacer for the bottom stud. And I made a bit of a mess, but it's on there. Alright, I've tossed the battery in, checked the oil, put the plugs back in it. Don't really have anything else hooked up. I just want to crank this thing over, see if it moves. Sweet. So I went to install the coolant temp sensor that comes with this Holley kit into the top of this housing. The old sensor just completely broke apart, and I pulled the hose off and it's super gummed up. The thermostat looks disgusting, so I'm kind of glad I pulled this off. Yeah, I popped the thermostat out. That never would have worked. Alright, so I made a run to AutoZone. Picked up a whole new thermostat housing, thermostat, a little bit of wiring for the EFI, some plugs and stuff, and a new rad cap, so should be rocking. Since I'm putting this temp sensor into this thermostat housing, and you want to see, you know, pretty accurate engine temps, I drilled a hole in the thermostat so some coolant can get by. Try to give this a little bit more accurate of a reading so the EFI can get good information. And voila! New thermostat and housing. Looking nice. Alright, next we're going to run some fuel lines. We've got some 5/16 for the return, some 3/8 for the supply. I'm going to put this little pressure gauge to the supply so I can make sure that the pump and the regulator are doing their job. I've got this little inline deal with an 1/8 inch MPT, a few clamps, and yeah, let's get some fuel lines run. Alright, got the fuel lines run here, connected to the tank. All along here, got the fuel filter in line there, on up the frame rail to the front, and up the firewall, and from the firewall up the back of the engine. Here's our feed with our pressure gauge to the Holley EFI, and our return back here feeds right along and runs along with the feed line. Boom, one more thing finished. Alright, now we're going to toss this O2 sensor in here. Going to drill a 3/4 inch hole with this step bit. Alright, we drilled a hole in the exhaust. Now let's get this O2 sensor tossed in. Boom. We got everything wired up here, power and ground. I went and got a new Edelbrock coil so I could connect all the wires to it. We got the pink wire to a 12-volt switch. All the fuel stuff hooked up. I think we're ready to turn the key on and see if this thing primes. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if this thing powers on when I turn the key on. Oh yeah, did it. I heard the pump kick on. And we got some fuel pressure here. This thing says to cycle the ignition, so let's see what happens. Well, my little ghetto throttle linkage broke pretty much instantly. Not great. Come on, baby. So I had the firing order off. Let's try this again. Got the jump pack hooked up to it. Hopefully it's got enough juice to kick over now. My God, boys, she's running. I'll be damned. Look at that. She's running. Get this thing off. Let's check and see if the alternator is charging here. Kind of charging. Battery's a little low, so. Everything's looking pretty good on here. Dude, she's running. Pretty cool. It's alive. All right, it's pretty warmed up now. To 190, I think the thermostat's open. Let's give her some braps. Woo! Bang, boy. A little smoky. So I found a little Edelbrock carburetor stud kit at AutoZone, and one of them fit. So we're back in business. All right, now that we got old girl running, we're going to change out the spark plugs, change out the oil, and hopefully take her for a drive down the road and get some fuel. Pretty pumped on this thing. Pretty solid rig here. All right, we got new plugs in this thing, new oil. Let's drive this thing around the block. Oh, hello. Throttle's a little touchy. She burns rubber. Typical Ford, the power steering winds. Uh-oh. Well, that didn't last long. All right, let's see what happens now. That was weird. Take it nice and easy here. We're driving, baby. Let's go. Well, had my first breakdown. Under a nice shade tree though, so that could be worse. Was trying to film a drive-by, but she died before I could do that. Pretty sweet little rig, even though it is broken. So I don't know what the deal is. The thing just died. When I try to start it, it acts like it wants to go, but the little screen does its thing. Try to kick her over. Nothing. Help! Breaker, we need a dragon wagon over here. We're broken down. Had to call my woman to come rescue me. Old Ford, pulling on old Ford. Get this thing home, see if we can't figure out what the deal is. Alright, well, we're back home. We got some figuring out to do, but after doing some Googling, we're thinking it might have something to do with that little unit right there. Alright, we're back in the garage. Got a new part in the mail from Motocraft here. Ignition control module, I guess. We're gonna go see if we can't toss this on the old girl here and make her run right. Alright, there it is. Let's fire this thing up. Let it get up to operating temperature and cross your fingers this thing will work. So what would happen, this thing would get up to operating temperature, and then if you shut it off, or it would even shut off on its own, I don't know, you would try to fire it up after it's all hot and everything, and it wouldn't fire again. So Google told me that it was this ignition control module. It's a pretty common thing to go out on these. Everyone keeps a spare in their truck evidently. So let's fire this thing up, let it warm up, and see what happens. Boom. We got a bit of an exhaust leak over here on this bank. I need to tidy up all these wires and everything, but until we can get this thing running tip top, we're just gonna leave it like it is. Alrighty, I just drove her around the block to let it get up to operating temperature. It's still running. I'll show you here. There's the deets. Now let's kill this thing and see if it starts up again. I don't know, we may have fixed it. Temps are all the way up above 200, it's still rocking. Well, I reckon let's go drive this thing and see what happens. Just want to do a burnout on this thing and it is not cooperating. At least it looks cool though. Alright, well that's going to do it for this video. I was hoping to get this thing going a little better and do some burnouts and stuff, but I don't know, this Sniper EFI doesn't want to cooperate with me. If you guys have any tips or tricks on maybe how to make this thing work, I don't know, let me know. Thanks for watching. See you next time.